My father excluded me from Christmas, so I acquired my own ranch. Then they invaded with a realtor, intending to sell my property for my brother. They assumed I was isolated. They never suspected I had a top-tier lawyer, surveillance, and a sheriff backing me. The dust cloud announced their arrival long before the black SUV rolled into view. My breath caught, a cold knot tightening in my stomach, as I watched my father step out, surveying my land as if he already owned it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet morning, a stark contrast to the peaceful sunrise I'd been enjoying moments before. It all started 8 months earlier, a text message buzzing against the pocket of my scrubs right in the middle of a shift at the hospital. I pulled out my phone, the sterile scent of antiseptic clinging to my clothes, and saw Tyler's name. My brother had sent a photo of a dining room table, impossibly perfect, adorned with gold-trimmed china and crystal glasses that caught the light from an ornate chandelier. "Christmas dinner setup looking amazing this year," the caption read. "Mom's going all out." I stared at that image, the vibrant colors of the festive spread feeling like a punch to the gut. It was set for 6. My parents, Tyler and his wife Kristen, and their twin boys. Everyone except me. This wasn't the first holiday I'd been surgically removed from, but seeing the physical evidence, the blatant omission, made the reality of my absence ache in a way I hadn't anticipated. I was 32, a registered nurse with a decade of experience navigating the delicate balance of life and death in pediatric care, yet in that moment, I felt like the same confused teenager who couldn't understand why her father looked at her with such palpable disappointment. My phone buzzed again, a sharp vibration that made me jump. This time, it was my mother. "Your father and I discussed it, and we think it's best if you spend Christmas on your own this year. Family time is important, and with everything that's happened, it would just be uncomfortable." Everything that's happened. That veiled phrase was their go-to for my refusal to loan Tyler $50,000 8 months prior. He'd wanted to invest in some nebulous cryptocurrency scheme that, to my experienced ears, sounded exactly like the kind of thing that would drain his bank account faster than he could say, "Get rich quick." I had worked too hard, too long, for my money to watch it vanish into his latest fantasy. My father had called me selfish, the word delivered with a cold, dismissive edge over the phone. "Your brother is trying to build something for his family, and you can't even help him out. What kind of sister are you?" The kind who pays her own bills, I remember thinking, the kind who doesn't expect handouts from relatives who've already bailed out her brother 3 times in 5 years. I deleted both messages without a reply. My hands were shaking slightly as I tucked the phone away. A 7-year-old with pneumonia needed his vitals monitored. A teenager recovering from appendix surgery wanted to know when she could go home. Their problems, their very real medical crises, mattered more than my family drama, or so I tried to tell myself. But when my shift ended at 11 that night, I sat in my car in the quiet hum of the hospital parking lot and let the full weight of it wash over me. My own father didn't want me at Christmas. My mother, who once made me hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and read me stories before bed, had effectively uninvited me via text message. That cuts deeper than you might think. This dynamic, where one child is perpetually supported and another is consistently undermined, is a classic pattern in narcissistic family systems. The independent child often becomes the scapegoat, seen as a threat to the family's carefully constructed narrative, leading to emotional manipulation and the constant shifting of blame. I drove home to my apartment, a modest 1-bedroom place that I'd meticulously furnished over the years. Every single thing I owned, from the couch to the television, the kitchen table where I ate dinner alone most nights, I had paid for myself. Nobody had given me anything, and I'd never asked for help I didn't absolutely need. The anger started building somewhere around 2 in the morning when sleep still wouldn't come. I kept seeing Tyler's smug face in that photo, kept replaying all the times my parents had made excuses for him while holding me to impossible standards. When he dropped out of college, it was because he was finding himself. When I graduated with honors, my father had asked why I hadn't gone to medical school instead of settling for nursing. But that was only the beginning of the nightmare, and I was about to write my own escape. I pulled out my laptop and started browsing real estate listings. I wasn't looking for anything specific at first, just scrolling, needing a distraction from the hurt that kept trying to surface. And that's when I found it. 300 acres in Montana, complete with a ranch house, a barn, and views that made my breath catch even through the cold glow of the computer screen. The price was high, impossibly high to some, but I'd been saving aggressively for years. I had investments, a healthy retirement account, and a down payment that would make any mortgage broker smile. I called the listing agent at 8 the next morning. "I want to see the property as soon as possible," I told her, my voice surprisingly steady. "Can you arrange a viewing this week?" Laura Hastings, the agent, sounded surprised but professional. "Absolutely. I can have everything ready by tomorrow if you're serious about this." "I'm serious." I took 2 personal days from work and flew to Montana on December 20th. The ranch was everything the photos had promised and more. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The house needed work, but the bones were solid hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, windows that looked out over rolling hills dotted with towering trees. The barn was weathered but structurally sound, and the land stretched out in every direction like something from a painting. The previous owners ran cattle here for 40 years, Laura explained as we walked the property. They retired and moved to Arizona. It's been on the market for 3 months, but we haven't had many serious inquiries. Most people looking at ranches this size want something turnkey. I stood on the front porch of that house, the sun glinting off distant snow-capped peaks, and imagined what it would feel like to own this. To have something that was entirely mine, something nobody could take away or make me feel guilty about. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone. This was about building a life that didn't depend on my family's conditional approval. This decision to invest in a tangible asset, rather than trying to placate my family's emotional demands, marked a profound psychological shift. For individuals raised in environments where their self-worth is tied to external validation, particularly parental approval, establishing autonomy and clear personal boundaries through a physical and emotional separation is an essential act of self-preservation. "I'll take it," I said. "I want to make an offer today." Laura's eyebrows went up. "Don't you want to think about it? Have an inspection done? This is a significant investment." "I'm aware. I want to make an offer." We negotiated through the afternoon, and by the time I flew back home the next day, I had a property under contract. The inspection happened on the 23rd, and while there were issues, nothing was serious enough to change my mind. The closing was scheduled for the first week of January. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment, eating takeout Chinese food and watching old movies. My phone stayed silent. My parents didn't call, and neither did Tyler. I'd become invisible to them, which, honestly, was fine. I was building something they couldn't touch. The ranch became official on January 4th. I signed more papers than I'd ever seen in one place, handed over a cashier's check that represented years of careful saving, and walked out of the title company with keys to 300 acres of Montana wilderness. Walking out of that office felt surreal. I sat in my rental car for 20 minutes, just holding the keys and the deed with my name printed on it in official black ink. Margaret Walsh, sole owner. Nobody else's name appeared anywhere on those documents. This wasn't jointly owned with a spouse or inherited from relatives. I'd earned every dollar that went into this purchase through 12-hour shifts, overtime pay, and choosing to save instead of spend. I called my best friend from nursing school, Jessica Ramirez, who'd moved to Oregon 3 years earlier. She was one of the few people I told about the ranch purchase. "Jess, I did it. It's mine." She screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Oh my God, how does it feel? Are you freaking out?" "I'm freaking out for you." "It feels right," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. Like this was what I was supposed to do all along. We talked for over an hour while I drove back to the airport. She asked about my plans, whether I'd told my family what I intended to do with 300 acres of land. I explained that my family didn't know and wouldn't know that I was cutting ties completely after the Christmas exclusion. "Good," she said fiercely. "They don't deserve to be part of this. This is yours, and you don't owe them any explanations." I gave my notice at the hospital 2 weeks later. My supervisor tried to convince me to stay, but I'd already made up my mind. I had enough saved to live on for a year while I figured out what came next. Maybe I'd turn the ranch into something productive. Or maybe I'd just live there and enjoy the peace. Either way, it would be on my terms. The hardest part about leaving was saying goodbye to my patients' families. I'd worked in pediatrics long enough to build relationships with parents whose children had chronic conditions requiring regular hospital stays. There was one mother, Andrea Cole, whose daughter had cystic fibrosis and had been in and out of our unit for years. When I told her I was leaving, she actually teared up. "You've been so good to Emma," she said, gripping my hand. "She asks for you specifically whenever we come in. What are we going to do without you?" I gave her my personal email address, something I normally never did, and promised to stay in touch. The other nurses here are wonderful. Emma will be in good hands. But watching Andrea walk away, I felt the sharp weight of what I was giving up. This job had given me purpose for a decade. I'd comforted scared children, explained procedures in ways they could understand, helped babies while their parents grabbed much-needed sleep. My work had mattered in tangible, immediate ways. Still, I knew I couldn't stay. Every shift reminded me of the life I'd been living on autopilot, going through motions without questioning whether this was actually what I wanted. The ranch represented possibility, freedom to discover who I was outside of expectations and obligations. But the real challenge, the one that would test every fiber of my newfound resolve, was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for its moment to strike. The move happened in early February. I hired professionals to transport my furniture, and I drove my Jeep across 3 states with everything else I owned packed into the back. When I pulled up to the ranch house for the first time as its owner, I sat in the driveway and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. This was mine. I didn't tell my parents about the ranch. I didn't tell anyone in my family. Actually, I changed my mailing address, updated my phone number, and let myself disappear from their radar. If they wanted to reach me, they'd have to make an effort. They didn't. March came and went. I spent my days fixing up the house, learning how to maintain the property, and getting to know my neighbors. The closest ranch was owned by a couple in their 60s, Tom and Patricia Morrison, who'd lived in Montana their whole lives. They showed me which fences needed repair first and where to buy supplies in town. "Good to have someone young out here," Tom said one afternoon while helping me replace rotted boards in the barn. "This land deserves someone who will take care of it." I started sleeping better than I had in years. The work was physical and exhausting, but it felt purposeful in a way my nursing job never quite had. I was building something with my own hands, creating a home that reflected who I actually was rather than who my family wanted me to be. The first major project I tackled was the kitchen. The appliances were outdated, the cabinets had water damage from a leak that had been poorly repaired, and the linoleum flooring was curling at the edges. I watched YouTube videos on cabinet installation, flooring removal, and basic plumbing. Tom Morrison came over several times to help with the heavier work, showing me how to properly level cabinets and cut flooring around corners. "You're a quick learner," he commented one afternoon while we were installing new countertops. "Most city folks who move out here give up after the first winter." "I'm not most city folks," I replied, using a level to check our work. "And I'm not going anywhere." The kitchen renovation took 3 weeks and most of my remaining savings buffer, but seeing the finished result made every dollar worth it. I'd chosen sage green cabinets that complemented the natural wood tones of the house, installed energy-efficient appliances that would lower my utility bills, and laid down hardwood flooring that matched the rest of the house perfectly. For the first time, I was living in a space that felt entirely mine, decorated according to my tastes rather than making do with whatever was cheapest or most practical. I started exploring the surrounding area, driving into town for supplies and getting to know the local businesses. The hardware store owner, a gruff man named Bill Peterson, recognized me on my 3rd visit and started offering advice without being asked. "You're the one who bought the Henderson place, right?" he said while ringing up fence posts and wire. "Good property. Old Jack Henderson took care of that land for 40 years. Nice to see someone willing to put in the work." These small recognitions meant more than I expected. In the city, I'd been anonymous, just another face in the crowd. Here, People knew my name, asked about my progress on the ranch, offered help without expecting anything in return. Patricia Morrison brought over a casserole one evening, saying she'd made too much for just her and Tom. "Freeze as well if you can't eat it all," she said, handing me the dish. "And if you need anything at all, you just holler." This was community in a way I'd never experienced. With my biological family. These people owed me nothing, had known me for barely a month, but they showed up anyway. In April, I hired a security company to install cameras around the property. It wasn't paranoia exactly, more like common sense. The ranch was remote, and I was a woman living alone. The cameras covered all the major entry points to the house, the barn, and the main gate at the end of the long driveway. The security technician, a former military guy named David Park, was thorough in his installation. He positioned cameras to eliminate blind spots, set up a system I could monitor from my phone, and configured alerts for any motion detected near the buildings after dark. "You've got good instincts," he told me while programming the final camera. "A lot of people don't think about security until after something happens. You're being proactive, which is smart." I didn't tell him that my caution came from a deep-seated knowing that my family might eventually find out where I'd gone. They had resources and connections, and my father was the type who didn't let things go easily. If he discovered I'd bought property without his knowledge or approval, there was no telling how he might react. I also got to know Sheriff Dale Crawford, who ran the county law enforcement office with a kind of no-nonsense efficiency I appreciated. He stopped by one day to introduce himself, and we ended up talking for over an hour about property rights and local regulations. "You need anything, you call," he told me before leaving. "We take care of our own out here." That sense of community was something I'd never had with my biological family. These people barely knew me, but they treated me with more respect and kindness than my own parents had shown in years. Little did I know, this careful preparation would soon be put to the ultimate test. May brought wildflowers across the hills and a text message from my mother that I almost deleted without reading. "Your father had a health scare. Nothing serious, but he's been asking about you. Maybe you could call." I stared at those words for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond, to reach out and try to rebuild what had been broken. But I remembered Christmas, remembered being told I wasn't welcome at my own family celebration. I remembered years of being compared to Tyler and found wanting. I didn't call. Instead, I focused on the ranch. I'd started looking into what it would take to run a small operation. Maybe some horses or cattle. The Morrisons had offered to help me learn, and I was seriously considering it. This place had potential, and I had time to figure out what I wanted to do with it. June 15th started like any other day. I was up early, drinking coffee on the front porch and watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink and gold. The security system was quiet, the cameras showing nothing but the usual wildlife moving through the property. Then, around 9 in the morning, the motion sensor at the front gate triggered an alert on my phone. I pulled up the camera feed and saw a luxury SUV stopped at the entrance, someone getting out to open the gate manually. My stomach dropped like a stone when I recognized the man behind the wheel. My father, looking older than I remembered, but still carrying himself with that same rigid posture that had intimidated me as a child. My mother sat in the passenger seat, and Tyler was in the back. Behind them, a second car pulled up. A woman I didn't recognize got out, wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase. She had that polished, professional look of someone who sold expensive things for a living. A cold dread spread through me, numbing my fingers. I grabbed my phone and dialed Sheriff Crawford's personal number. He picked up on the second ring. "Dale, I've got a situation," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "I have unauthorized people on my property, and I need you here now. On my way. Don't engage with them until I arrive." I also called the attorney I'd hired during the ranch purchase, a sharp woman named Catherine Reynolds, who'd served as a JAG lawyer before going into private practice. She specialized in property law, and she'd been invaluable during the closing process. "Catherine, I need you at the ranch immediately. My family just showed up with what looks like a real estate agent, and they're trespassing. Don't let them in the house. I'm 40 minutes away, but I'll be there as fast as I can. Record everything." I switched my phone to video mode and positioned myself in the doorway as my father's SUV rolled up the driveway. The second car followed, and both vehicles parked directly in front of the house like they had every right to be there. My father got out first, his expression a mixture of surprise and something that looked almost like satisfaction. He found me. "There you are," he said, walking toward the porch like he owned the place. "We've been trying to reach you for months." "You're trespassing," I replied, holding up my phone so he could see I was recording. "Leave now, or I'm having you arrested." My mother emerged from the car, her hand pressed to her chest in that dramatic way she had whenever she wanted to emphasize her distress. "Sweetheart, please. We just want to talk." Tyler climbed out of the back seat, and the real estate agent joined them, looking increasingly uncomfortable as she realized this wasn't going to be the straightforward property showing she'd apparently been expecting. "Talk about what?" I kept my voice level professional. "About how you uninvited me from Christmas. About how you've ignored me for 6 months. We were hurt," my father said, his tone suggesting I was being utterly unreasonable. "You refused to help your brother when he needed you. I refused to give him $50,000 for a scam investment." "That's not the same thing." The real estate agent cleared her throat. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Walsh told me this was his property. He said he wanted to list it for sale to help his son start a business." Everything clicked into place then. They'd found out about the ranch somehow. And my father, in his boundless arrogance, had decided to sell it out from under me. Except he couldn't, because his name wasn't on the deed. "This is my property," I said clearly, making sure the phone captured every word. "I purchased it in January with my own money. My father has no legal claim to this land, and you were brought here under false pretenses." The agent's face paled. "Mr. Walsh, you told me you own this ranch." "I'm her father," he said dismissively. "What's hers is family property. She's being selfish again, and we're going to fix this situation." I almost laughed at the audacity. He genuinely believed he had the right to sell my property simply because I was his daughter. The entitlement was staggering. This scene vividly illustrates the concept of familial enmeshment taken to an extreme, where personal property and individual autonomy are completely disregarded under the guise of family obligation. The father's assertion, "What's hers is family property," exemplifies a complete lack of personal boundaries, common in deeply dysfunctional systems where control masquerades as care. "You need to leave," I repeated. "All of you. Now." "We're not going anywhere until we discuss this like adults," my father said, actually taking a step toward the porch. "You owe your brother this much. He's family." That's when I heard the sound of tires on gravel. Sheriff Crawford's patrol car came up the driveway, lights flashing. He parked behind the real estate agent's vehicle, effectively blocking them in. Dale got out of his car slowly, his hand resting casually on his belt near his service weapon. He was in his 50s, built like someone who'd spent his life doing physical work, and his presence immediately changed the energy of the situation. "Folks, I'm going to need to see some identification," he said calmly. "And I'm going to need an explanation for why you're on private property without permission." My father tried his usual authoritative approach. "I'm this young lady's father, and we're having a family discussion. This doesn't concern law enforcement." "Actually, it does," Dale replied, not moving from his position. "This young lady called me and reported trespassing. That makes it my concern." "IDs, please." The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in bureaucratic procedure. Dale checked everyone's identification, called in the information to dispatch, and took statements from each person. The real estate agent was nearly in tears, explaining that she'd been contacted by someone claiming to be the property owner and had agreed to view the land for a potential listing. "Did you verify ownership before coming out here?" Dale asked her. "He seemed so confident," she said weakly. "I didn't think to check the county records." What happened next, though, was something I never, in my wildest dreams, thought I'd witness. Catherine Reynolds arrived while Dale was still taking statements. She pulled up in a black Mercedes, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd been a Navy JAG for 12 years before going into private practice, and she had the kind of precise, intimidating competence that came from years of handling high-stakes legal situations. "I'm Catherine Reynolds, Miss Walsh's attorney," she announced, handing Dale her card. "I understand we have a trespassing situation and attempted fraud," I added, my anger finally breaking through the calm facade I'd been maintaining. "My father brought a realtor here to sell property he doesn't own." Catherine turned to my father with a kind of cold, assessing look that probably made opposing counsel reconsider their life choices. "Did you represent yourself as the owner of this property?" "I'm her father," he repeated, like that explained everything. "She bought this place out of spite, and she's going to sell it so Tyler can have the money he needs." "Do you have any legal claim to this property? Are you listed on the deed?" "She's my daughter." "That makes it family property." Catherine actually smiled, though there was nothing warm about it. "That's not how property law works, Mr. Walsh. Your daughter is an adult who purchased this ranch with her own funds. You have no legal right to sell it, represent yourself as its owner, or even be on this property without her permission. What you've done today constitutes criminal trespassing, and your statements to the realtor could be prosecuted as attempted fraud." My mother made a small sound of distress. Tyler, interestingly, had stayed completely silent throughout the entire confrontation, standing near his car with his arms crossed. "I want them arrested," I said clearly. "All three of them. They trespassed on my property with the intent to commit fraud." Dale looked at Catherine, who nodded. "My client has that right, Sheriff." What happened next was something I'll remember for the rest of my life. Dale read my father's rights while putting him in handcuffs. The man who'd made me feel small and inadequate my entire life, who told me I was selfish for not bankrolling my brother's schemes, was being arrested on my property. My mother started crying, actually sobbing, as Dale cuffed her, too. "How can you do this to your own parents? We raised you." "You uninvited me from Christmas," I said, my voice shaking now with the weight of everything I'd been holding back. "You told me I wasn't welcome at family events because I wouldn't give Tyler money. You've spent my entire life making me feel like I wasn't good enough, and now you show up here thinking you can sell my property out from under me? You're not parents, you're thieves." Tyler got cuffed without protest, though he shot me a look that was pure hatred. The real estate agent was let go with a warning after Catherine verified she'd been acting on false information. As Dale loaded my family into his patrol car, Catherine turned to me. "I'm going to need copies of all your security footage. We'll want documentation of everything they said and did here today." "I have it all," I assured her. Every camera was recording. She squeezed my shoulder, a brief moment of humanity breaking through her professional demeanor. "You did the right thing. Don't let them make you doubt that." After they left, I sat on the porch steps and let myself shake. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a complicated mixture of relief, sadness, and vindication. I'd stood up to my father for the first time in my life, and it had felt both terrifying and necessary. The reality of what had just happened started sinking in slowly. I'd had my own parents arrested. My brother, too, though Tyler had always felt more like a stranger than family. They were sitting in county jail right now, being processed and fingerprinted, all because they thought they could waltz onto my property and sell it without consequences. Part of me felt guilty, that trained response from years of being told I was selfish whenever I prioritized my own needs. Shouldn't I have given them another chance? Shouldn't I have talked to them first, tried to reason with them before calling law enforcement? But then I remembered my father's words. What's hers is family property. He'd actually said that out loud, recorded on video, in front of witnesses. He genuinely believed my ranch belonged to him simply because he was my father. That wasn't a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with conversation. That was a fundamental failure to see me as an autonomous adult with rights to my own property. My hands were still trembling when I went inside to download the security footage onto a USB drive for Catherine. The cameras had captured everything from multiple angles. My father opening the gate without permission. The realtor getting out of her car with her briefcase. My mother's dramatic performance on the driveway. Tyler's hostile expression when he was being handcuffed. Watching the footage back was surreal. I looked calmer in the video than I'd felt during the actual confrontation. My voice stayed steady even when my father tried to intimidate me, and I'd handled the legal aspects exactly right by calling Sheriff Crawford and Catherine before engaging with any of them. Jessica called that evening after I texted her a brief summary of what happened. They did what? She practically shouted into the phone. Your dad tried to sell your ranch while you were standing right there with a real estate agent he'd lied to about ownership? I confirmed, settling into my porch chair with a glass of wine. Catherine says the fraud charges might stick because he explicitly told the agent it was his property. Good. Let him deal with the consequences for once. Your whole family has coasted on the idea that Tyler's needs matter more than yours, and it's about time someone called them on it. We talked for over 2 hours, processing everything that had happened. Jessica had met my parents a few times during nursing school, enough to understand the dynamic I'd grown up with. She'd never liked them. Had actually told me once that my mother's passive-aggressive comments disguised as concern were toxic. You know what's wild? Jessica said toward the end of our conversation. They could have just accepted that you wanted space. They could have left you alone, let you build your life in Montana, and maybe eventually you would have reached out. But they couldn't do that. They had to try to control you even when you were 1,000 miles away. She was right. This wasn't about the ranch, not really. This was about my father's inability to accept that I'd made a major life decision without his input or approval. He couldn't stand that I'd found happiness outside the family structure he controlled. Tom Morrison showed up an hour later, having heard about the commotion from someone in town. You okay? He asked, settling onto the steps beside me. I think so, I said. Honestly, that was my family. They tried to sell my ranch. He let out a low whistle. Some family. Yeah. Tom didn't press for details, which I appreciated. He just sat with me while the sun set, a quiet presence that felt more supportive than any words could have been. We sat there in silence for a while, watching the last slivers of light move across the sky. Eventually, Patricia came by with dinner, and the three of us ate together on my porch. They didn't ask questions or push for details. They just sat with me, and that meant more than they probably realized. Our daughter lives in Seattle, Patricia mentioned while we were finishing the meal. We don't see her much, maybe twice a year if we're lucky. But she calls every week, sends photos of our grandkids, includes us in her life, even from far away. That's what family should be. The implication was clear. My family had failed at the most basic requirement of familial relationships, respect. Distance didn't have to mean disconnection, but disrespect made connection impossible. The legal proceedings took months to resolve. My father, mother, and Tyler were all charged with criminal trespassing. My father faced additional charges of attempted fraud for misrepresenting himself to the real estate agent. Catherine pushed aggressively for prosecution, and the county attorney agreed that the case was worth pursuing. In August, they all pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for probation and restitution. Part of the settlement included a permanent restraining order preventing any of them from coming within 500 feet of my property. I didn't attend the hearings. Catherine handled everything, keeping me updated but protecting me from having to see them again. She sent me copies of all the documents, including the transcripts where my father tried to justify his actions by claiming he was helping his daughter make better financial decisions. The ranch thrived under my care. I started small, bringing in a few horses and learning the rhythms of ranch life. The Morrisons became like the family I'd never had, teaching me everything from fence repair to basic veterinary care. Other neighbors stopped by with advice, tools, and offers of help. In September, I got a letter from my mother. It arrived at the ranch through regular mail, which meant she'd somehow found my address, despite the restraining order preventing direct contact. I don't understand how we got here, she wrote. You used to be such a sweet girl, always trying to make everyone happy. Your father and I just wanted what was best for the family. Tyler needed that money for his boy's education, and you have so much. Why couldn't you share? I burned the letter in the fireplace without responding. There was nothing to say to someone who still couldn't see that what they'd done was wrong. The truth was simpler than she wanted to believe. I'd spent 32 years trying to earn my family's approval, bending myself into shapes that never quite fit, sacrificing my own needs to keep the peace. The ranch represented the first time I'd chosen myself, and they couldn't forgive me for it. By October, I'd settled into a routine that felt more like living than anything I'd experienced before. I woke up early, took care of the horses, worked on property maintenance, and spent my evenings reading on the porch or cooking dinner while watching the sunset. It was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. I had neighbors who checked in on me, a community that had welcomed me without judgment, and land that responded to my care. I started volunteering at the local medical clinic 1 day a week, using my nursing skills to help people who couldn't always afford health care. The director, Dr. Paul Anderson, was grateful for the assistance, and I was glad to be doing something meaningful again. "You ever think about going back to hospital work?" he asked one afternoon after we treated a rancher's broken arm. "No," I said without hesitation. "I like it here. I like the pace, the people, the fact that I can actually make a difference without drowning in paperwork and bureaucracy." He nodded, understanding in a way that only someone who had also chosen rural life could. Montana has a way of keeping the people who belong here. In November, I got a notification that the restraining order had been violated. My father had driven past the ranch 3 times in 1 week, slowing down each time to look at the property. Sheriff Crawford added a violation to his record, and Catherine filed for a more restrictive order that would prevent him from even entering the county without prior court approval. "He's testing boundaries," Catherine explained over the phone. "Seeing if you'll enforce the order or if he can intimidate you into backing down." "I'm not backing down," I said firmly. "This is my home, and he doesn't get to take that from me." The expanded restraining order was granted. I didn't hear anything else from my family after that. Christmas arrived again, 1 year after the text message that had changed everything. I spent the holiday with the Morrisons and several other neighbors, a potluck celebration at Tom and Patricia's house that felt warm and genuine. Nobody expected anything from me except my company, and the gift exchange was thoughtful without being extravagant. "To new traditions," Patricia said, raising her glass of wine in a toast. "To new traditions," I echoed, feeling the truth of it settle into my bones. I thought about my family sometimes, wondered if they were gathered around that gold-trimmed china, if Tyler's latest scheme had panned out, if my mother still wrote letters she knew I'd never answer. But those thoughts came less frequently now, and they hurt less when they did. The ranch had given me something I'd been searching for my entire life without knowing it, not just independence or financial security, but the freedom to define success on my own terms. I wasn't a disappointment here. I wasn't being compared to anyone or found wanting. I was just myself, and that was enough. Standing on my porch on New Year's Eve, watching snow fall across the mountains, I felt a peace that had nothing to do with revenge or vindication. My father had tried to take this from me, and I fought back. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation, because this place, this life, was worth fighting for. The cameras kept recording. The security system stayed active, and the restraining order remained in place. But I wasn't living in fear or anger anymore. I was just living, finally, in a home I'd built for myself. And that was the best revenge of all. If you found yourself in a similar situation, where your family's expectations threatened your personal autonomy and well-being, what boundaries would you draw, and how far would you go to protect your peace?